Now, one of the claims you'll hear in my field, so in early Chinese studies, is that the early Chinese or the Chinese or even maybe the East entirely completely lacked mind-body dualism. That mind-body dualism is in fact not a human universal, that it's the product of Plato or Christianity or Descartes. It's a particularly Western thing that we don't find in other parts of the world. Now, if this were true, this would be a big problem for the cognitive science of religion, because we've been arguing that things like mind-body dualism or theory of mind are basic building blocks of religious cognition. So the way the debate goes on traditionally in my field is, again, using close reading techniques. So I do a close reading of the text in my field. I build up an intuitive sense of what are the main themes, what are the important themes, how do they relate to one another, through this iterative close reading that I do over the course of decades as I learn a new language and a new corpus. I then make an argument. I say, well, the early Chinese were mind-body dualists, and I pull out passages that I can remember. And I think, oh yeah, there's that passage from that text, there's that passage from that text. I pull them out and I use them as evidence for my argument. We use evidence in the humanities, but the way in which evidence, particularly textual evidence, is marshaled so far is a cherry-picking technique. You're picking passages that support your argument, and then your opponent picks passages that support her argument, and it's really hard to get any kind of resolution when that's the method you use. So this is where I felt that these distant reading techniques could be helpful, because distant reading, again, you're drawing away from the corpus. You're not reading sentence by sentence, but that gives you a picture of big patterns. It allows you to see what the prevalent patterns are in a text. So there have been a few ways in which we've tried to use distant reading techniques or take advantage of the digital format of these corpora to approach this issue of mind-body dualism in early China. So one study, the first study we did, involved essentially using a concordance approach. We pulled out all the passages in the particular relatively small corpus that had the word xin in it. So xin is a Chinese word that refers, it's originally a picture of the heart, the physical heart. But everyone in the field agrees if there is a word in classical Chinese that means mind, it's this word. So we pull out all the passages that have this word in it, and then we had teams of coders code the characterization of xin in these passages. So how is it being contrasted with the body? What sort of functions does it have? And we had intercoder reliability measures, so we saw how much coders agreed on how xin was being characterized in a particular passage. This gave us a much more objective view of how xin is being used over the course of an entire corpus than we could have gotten just cherry-picking individual passages. And incidentally, the results suggest that the Chinese were mind-body dualists, and in fact, the mind-body dualism seems to sharpen over time. That was one study we did that's still using human coders. One of the problems with using human coders is you have to pay them. They have to sit and do this very boring coding task, and you can't really do a large corpus because it's so time consuming. So one of the things we've also been working with more recently has been automated techniques. So these are techniques where you're using just statistical patterns in a text. You don't need human coders anymore. And then you can look at enormous corpora. So we use this enormous corpus that has 6 million characters. So it's a huge, it's got all these histories in it. It's got many different genres. It covers a long time period. And we did some analyses, and I did these with Dr. Nichols and some other colleagues, where we looked at various things. So the first thing we did was some co-occurrence analysis. So one of the things, if the early Chinese were mind-body holists, so if they weren't dualists, one of the implications of that is there's nothing special about the xin, this organ, the xin. It's just like the spleen, it's just like the lungs, it's just like any other organ. One of the predictions then would be that there shouldn't be any unusual relationship between xin and the words. There are 3 main words for the body. We shouldn't expect xin to be co-occurring in the same sentence with these words for the body any more than the other organs do, if they're all the same. What we do find is that xin is off the chart. So when we look at the co-occurrence scores, xin is appearing all the time in conjunction with body terms, which suggests that there's something going on. There's something fraught about the xin-body relationship that's not true of any of the other organs. This is precisely what you would predict if the Chinese were at least implicit mind-body dualists, if they thought there was something special about the mind, if they thought there was something special about the xin. So what I liked about the study is we also used other automated techniques and got very similar results. So another thing we did was topic modeling. So we looked at what characters are traveling together in this early Chinese corpus. And what we found is that, first of all, xin appears in a lot of the most important topics or groups of words, which none of the other organs do, only xin. And when Xin is popping up, it's popping up in the company of words that have to do with planning, decision making, cognition, intention. In other words, all of the words that you would expect if Xin meant something very much like the English word mind. So that's a very helpful result, I think, in resolving this debate. Another, my favorite of our results was a hierarchical cluster analysis technique. So this is, Dr. Nichols talked about unsupervised techniques. This is an unsupervised techniques. What you're doing is giving an algorithm the entire corpus and letting it troll through the corpus and start cutting it up. So we're looking for certain keywords. We have like 20 terms we're interested in. Say which ones are closest together in terms of how the distance in the corpus, how they appear together. So it does that once. It then takes the thing one half that it's split up and it splits that one up. So it produces essentially a tree. It's called a dendrogram. So what you see here is Xin, heart, mind, appearing very closely, is on one tree together with one of the three main body terms. And then when you go out to the next node, it's the other two body terms. So Xin is appearing just tightly tied together with the three body terms. Then when you go out one more branch, you get the organs that have to do with perception and communication. So the ones that basically help the mind do its job by perceiving things and communicating to others. And so again, it's beautiful. And then all of the other organs are down an entirely other tree. They're not related at all. What something like this dendrogram is giving you is essentially a conceptual map of the corpus. It's showing you how these key terms you care about connect to one another in the corpus. And what we're seeing here is exactly, again, what we'd expect if the Chinese were mind-body dualists. There's something strange about the Xin, and it's really problematically contrasted with or compared to the body.